All right, it's 4 o'clock, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. I want to point out that the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings, and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. So I'll ask first for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. There being none, I will proceed on to the consent matters. Does any councillor want any of the consent matters pulled? There being no such request, would somebody move the consent matters? Councillor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Van Holst. Any further comments? We'll bring that up for vote.
Okay, so closing the vote, motion passed 6-0.
And since we have a full matter on the schedule items, I want to move to item number 4.2, which is a motion, I believe, by Councillor Van Holst regarding potential transportation projects. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I've actually forwarded to the clerks a motion that combines 4.2 and 5.3. So it's an amended motion. Perhaps we could consider that one instead.
All right, so you're moving that?
Yes.
Is there a seconder for that? Mayor Holder will second it. Any discussion? Councillor Pelosa?
In regards to 5.3, the London Hydro invitation, I would like it to read, just if the CEO can't make it, that it be him or a designate. If we were inviting somebody, that it didn't have to be that specific person.
Okay, I consider that.
Is that a friendly amendment? Yeah. Yes, so we'll make that amendment. Mayor Holder?
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Councillor Van Holst's accommodation with respect to working through on this amendment. What this speaks to, fellow councillors, is the issues around a pocket of funding that we have from the provincial and federal governments and to do with our transportation and transit projects. And the issue is really going to be our ability to satisfy the timing of both the provincial and federal governments, and I'm particularly concerned about the timing around the federal government's ability to take this approval through the Treasury Board. And you'll note that the two amounts we're referring to are the $205 million from the federal government and the $170 million from the provincial government, which we secured in the last several days and had confirmed. And the issue is going to be that, in all likelihood, with an election coming up federally in October of this year, once the federal parliament recesses, the likelihood that it will reconvene except for some emergency is unlikely. So it was felt, and certainly I feel it's important that we secure the funding and the approval of the various projects that will be reviewed over the next number of weeks. That we do that, and frankly, time is of the essence. I know this is an issue that has been discussed, and one aspect of transit was very clearly defined and supported in the last council. I don't know there are a number of views as it relates to things on a go-forward basis, but the commitment that we talked about was securing the funds. That's been done, but now we have to. The process will be that the our municipal council has to support the projects going forward that then have to be submitted to the provincial government, which requires then a transfer payment agreement with the federal government, which then has to go in front of their Treasury Board and ultimately approved. I've had private meetings as well with the federal Minister of Infrastructure when I was in Ottawa recently, and he's responsible for the issues around transit and transportation, and he's indicated he will do his very best once the province has provided those their support of the projects going forward. So I share it with the committee so that you know that there's a lot that has to be done, including a public engagement, a public meeting as well, and we think that's critical for this, so that we can go forward and ensure that we don't lose the funding. So I wanted to speak to that to give you a sense of why this has come up today. It will go to our next council meeting for its disposition, but time is very much of the essence, and we don't want to lose the opportunities going forward. And it's my hope that we'll find the projects that councillors can, in the main, support, so that we can take advantage of both the provincial and federal funding, which also includes a municipal contribution. Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments? Councillor Helmer?
Thank you. Through the chair, about the second part, which came through on the added, the request to the CEO of London Hydro to come to the March 4th meeting. I wonder, through the chair, if our staff could just comment on that. I know that that's obviously been a direction of council for quite a while to have the report back, and whether the CEO of Hydro is prepared to come to that meeting and ready to talk about that or not.
I can actually comment on that, and I was going to raise this in any event. The CEO of Hydro has actually sent a letter, sent it today at 3 o'clock, and he indicates that he feels it's premature for him to do that. And I don't know whether, given that notification, we might just remove that aspect from the motion. If he feels it's premature and he doesn't think he can arrive on that date, I don't see why we'd want to force him to do that.
Thank you. I believe that may have been the chair that sent that. But Mr. Chair, the CEO has been prepared to make with the estimates that he has. But of course, it's a changing landscape, and what he doesn't want to do is come forward and provide estimates that aren't the plan that our staff is ready with. So when they are prepared with their estimates, which I think are going to be coming for us to look at the public participation meeting too, then I think at that time we can extend that invitation, and he should be able to say that information. But what he has, I believe, will be very important. All right,
I understand that, but what we've received today is something from the chair of the board of directors of Hydro saying they won't be ready on this timeline that's been set out for the other part of the motion. So without sort of extending this discussion, it seemed to me, and you can make this decision whether you want to remove that from your motion. Mr. Mayor.
Well, for fear that that the motion in the main would get defeated, which I do not think is the appropriate response, then I would I would look to the councillor to see if we can separate this as it was originally into two motions and deal with them consecutively, one after the other.
Fine with me, as long, I just wanted to give him the chance to see whether he wanted to go ahead with it, given what I've received today, the city clerk's received.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, it's just, I interpreted the letter differently than you seem to have to. It ends and said, we would recommend that the date for London Hydro's presentation and Civic Administration's report on the issue of London Hydro's infrastructural renewal needs and costs related to the BRT initiative be decided by city administration. And I think this is asking our staff to send an invitation out to them. So that. I think their hope was to make sure that when the staff is ready to present on the BRT, they would be ready as well. That would be the timing.
Well, that's fine. Why don't we just, to deal with it, I just want to be really clear with the committee as to what this letter is saying, and I don't want to pull parts out of it. It says, as a result, at this time it would be premature to fulfill the requirements of the resolution of October 16th, i.e. for London Hydro to make a presentation on an infrastructure renewal needs and the estimated costs, including the impact of those costs on hydro ratepayers. So, I mean, we can ask them to show up at that meeting. I just worry that that's going to impede what we're receiving. And maybe Ms. Scher can help me with that.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have had a number of conversations with London Hydro. Typically, we'd be negotiating these cost shares as part of a detailed design process when we're usually around 70% done. We have not started detailed design. We gave them an early heads up, as we did other utility providers, because of the magnitude of the work. We're working very closely with Hydro. We would share the concerns that Mr. Sharma and that the chair of the board have raised, that any information now would be extremely preliminary and could potentially actually be detrimental to other negotiations on non-rapid transit projects where we're negotiating similar funding arrangements. My understanding based on our conversations with London Hydro is they would prefer to proceed at a later date when we have more certainty about the numbers and the design is progressed.
Thank you very much. Does that help, Councillor?
Okay, perhaps if I can, through you, a question to our staff then, is that information going to be available when we make the decision later in March about what projects are going forward for funding to the provincial and federal governments?
Ms. Scher.
No, it will not be available for this project or any other project that will be on the list. Given the timeframes that are required, we will have a high level of magnitude estimate for those various projects, an order of magnitude estimate for operating costs, and an assessment of the likelihood that they're funding eligible, as well as some commentary around timing and implementation.
Okay, Councillor, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a chance to withdraw that part of the motion. If you don't want to, we'll separate it out and vote on them separately. So you choose.
Okay, thank you. I'll withdraw that and perhaps come back at another time.
All right, so we're going to withdraw the part of the motion that relates to the London Hydro. Any other comments on what is remaining of the motion? Councillor Helmer?
I just want to say on the other part of the motion, I think it's a good idea to have that kind of, I was going to ask the staff, what kind of information are you going to bring forward? But I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think having a public participation meeting is a really good idea.
Thank you very much. Any further comments? Councillor Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, I have two questions. The answer to the first may predicate whether or not the second even needs to be answered. But through you to staff, I know that we had a heritage impact study that was involved around the proposed BRT plan as well. Will that be completed in time for this March 18th deadline, or this March 18th proposed meeting, so that we would understand the heritage impacts as well?
Mr. Chair, yes, it will be.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my second question then is more one of timing in general. My only concern, I support the motion and I'll be voting in favor of this, whether there's a change to the timing or not. My only concern now is that, is there any opportunity, and this may be best addressed through the clerk, to have that SPPC meeting sooner, just because it does give us only a very short window, 1 week, since we've heard from the public, to digest their input before we make a final decision. I recognize that we're at the mercy of the calendars and other meetings that are scheduled, so I'm just wondering if there is an opportunity to schedule that earlier than March 18th, and if in fact we did, my second question to staff would be, would you be able to have something to us earlier if that's possible?
Why don't we start with staff, and they can tell us whether, it's a tight timeline, so let's find out.
Mr. Chair, we've worked backwards from the deadlines required for the public participation meeting in terms of the legal requirements for notice. So to move it any earlier is quite challenging. We also would be required to publish the information. We'd want to get that out about the week of the 11th, so people have some time with it prior to the PPM, and it would be difficult to have anything meaningful created in advance of that. This schedule is extremely aggressive. We will meet it, but to compress it any further would be problematic.
I think that satisfies my question, that I don't think we need to hear from the clerks about other options, because if that's challenging enough, then I accept that that's challenging enough.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chair. It's comforting to know that I'm not the only person who seems to work backwards. It's, a lot of people say that to me. Is there anything further on this motion, Councillor Pelosi?
Thank you. I would just look to some verification on what your vision is of the PPM, knowing how full the gallery can be and how some things have gone in the past, of how, just what your vision is for this.
All right, so you're asking that through me?
Yes.
To the mayor, if he can answer that. Otherwise, we could bump a London Knights game and get Budweiser Gardens again.
Well, thank you, Chair. At this stage, I did not foresee that this might be the facility that we would have that public participation. I think it might be somewhat challenging. Those details are yet to be worked out. I can tell you we do not want to exclude opportunities for public input. We think that's really important. We do recognize that this is an issue that has been discussed previously at some length, but to be fair, we're coming up with a number of proposals for council's consideration, and that's why we're going to be very measured in the proposals that we bring forward. We're looking to find particularly areas where we can find consensus among council and I would hope and believe consensus amongst Londoners, knowing that our citizens have a variety of opinions on many issues. But it's always been our approach with this, particularly as it relates to this funding and this tight window and the election, all the other dynamics that go into this, that the better able we are to find specific areas of consensus and then vote on issues and deal with issues that may not be so. Our goal may not be reachable, but is to, if we acknowledge that the funding envelope is in the range amongst all three levels of government, somewhere in the $500 plus $530 million range. And if I added up 205, 170, and 165 millions, I would come up with the actual number. Basically, it's 30-cent municipal dollars to accommodate projects that might well, without trying to anticipate in advance, might well involve areas of road widenings and lights and bus bays and other transit-related issues. And again, this is a transit, not a transportation, but transit-related issues. So we are being very mindful, and it's my hope that when we finalize the lists, that we can bring forward to council and get input from the public on these, that we're going to find some consensus around it. So it's the long way of answering your question about venue, to be absolutely determined, but likely not here, probably a larger venue to accommodate. But I would ask the indulgence of this committee to bear with us as we're working out that detail.
Two issues right now that have come down. First of all, if we want to have a meeting off venue outside of here, that would have to be a council decision. So somebody would have to come back and say, we're going to have a meeting off-site and here's what it's going to be. So that's something that would have to come back to be dealt with. The other thing is with regard to the date, that there's a couple of days open that week, but you know, we have scheduled meetings already. So Somebody's going to have to work on the issue of when is that meeting going to take place and where it's going to be, and it's going to have to be brought back to council. Mayor Holder.
Thank you, Chair, and that would be the absolute intention, is to bring it back to council for their decision.
All right. So could I just remind the committee, we're not talking about the substantive issues. We started to get into discussion about what might be, you know, projects, et cetera, et cetera. That's not what we're doing today. We're just saying we're going to have a meeting. So Councillor Van Holst, just keeping that in mind, we're...
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. Of course, we might be able to come up with a date by the time this, our next council meeting is there and vote on it then. Also point out that previously I brought up the idea of a public participation meeting, but we wanted to make sure that council had an opportunity to discuss the issues first. So the timing for this is good. There was support for public participation previously, but we were going to wait till after, for instance, the Rapid Transit Implementation Working Group meeting, and that will occur after that. So I think it's good timing.
All right. Anything further on the issue at hand? Councillor Plaza?
Thank you. Through the chair, will staff have access to this list, if we do vote yes on this, of projects that qualify or prior to the SPPC meeting? Or like just the leeway that we could prepare what we're looking at?
Ms. Chair?
Oh, Mr. Chair, it would be our intention to provide the list publicly a week prior to the SPPC meeting. So that would give an opportunity for councillors to connect with constituents and to ask questions of staff in advance if there are any, and hopefully spark interest for those who may wish to attend the actual meeting as well.
Anything further on the motion? Councillor Hopkins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for recognizing me. I see the motion is in front of us. Is this the motion that the committee is voting on?
I assume it is, since it's on the screen. Is there something you want to comment on it?
Oh, now it's changed.
All right.
And I do have a second question, just following up on, I know there is a working group. How does the working group be part of this process?
Just with regard to my knowledge of the, you're talking about the rapid transit?
Yes.
Yeah, that committee has not yet met. It's an implementation group. I'm just speaking from the chair. It's not a decision maker as to what the project is. It's an implementation committee. So it has not met yet, pending a decision by council.
Okay, and I would assume that it will be meeting then, once a decision is being made by council.
I assume it will. Can I just point out to committee, we do have a full agenda and we're going to try to move along to a vote. Councillor Cassidy?
Thank you for recognizing me, Mr. Chair. I have a question through you to Mayor Holder, because I believe it was Mayor Holder that added the part about the public participation meeting. So it was the mayor that brought up the 60-day deadline, more or less. And I'm wondering through you, Mr. Chair, is there no concern about not meeting this 60-day deadline? And I would like to know also when that countdown began.
Then that's through me to the mayor. Would you like to answer that, Mr. Mayor Holder?
Well, let's do our best with that as an answer. Certainly by the, as long as the council is clear, these timelines weren't put on. We're not the ones that created the urgency of the timelines. What creates the urgency of the timelines ultimately is federal parliament recessing, most likely in June. That's typical based on my experience with them. And it could be anywhere in June from first, second, third week, could be even a bit later. But as a result of that, the key part to that is the Treasury Board, which will make the ultimate and final approval with respect to this. And certainly when I met with the Federal Minister of Infrastructure, and I can tell you that he was really clear. He was looking for an even slightly more accelerated timeline than what we had thought. As a result of that, the key is to get this, ultimately is to get this into the hands of the federal government via the provincial government through us initially, as I had explained in the prior comment. And we actually even looked at a 30-day timeline without public participation. We didn't feel that was appropriate. So as a result of that, the working group, which certainly included Councillor Helmer and myself, And members of staff, we looked at this and we tried to come up with a timeline, and as our city engineers indicated, work backwards from that to so that we give appropriate notice and frankly appropriate review of all the various projects. And I didn't want to presuppose by giving you potential examples of what could be included, because I'm not here to prejudge what could be on the list. But I would say it's my hope that when this is done, that we'll be able to have projects that council and the broader community are comfortable with. So it's a function of timelines, Councillor, working backwards through you, Chair. And we felt that the public participation component was important.
Anything further? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I guess through you to Ms. Scheer, the motion is for staff to assemble a list of transportation projects. I guess my question is, outside of the proposed BRT program, do you have a list of transit-related infrastructure projects that are sort of already on a wish list, so to speak, that might get added if other things are subtracted?
That's an interesting question. Again, it delves into the whole issue of what the projects are, and I hope we're not going to get into a discussion today about what are projects that are preferential. That'll then people up in the gallery, I hope you brought your sleeping bags, because it could go on for days. So can we just yeah, that'd be great. If you
Sorry, Mr. Chair, thank you. I'll just clarify a little bit. I guess what I'm asking is not specific examples of projects that might be on the list, more in terms of, does staff have to go out and do research work, or is there a list that they can start working from already?
Mr. Chair, we have a variety of master plans and transportation plans for the city related to cycling, transit, transportation in general, obviously Parks and Rec. So we'll be drawing from those sorts of plan sources. Those projects, however, are in various states of readiness, and we will provide advice on what work would need to happen should they be accelerated, and whether or not the dollar value would be sufficient to ensure that the full allocations are used. We've talked process with direction from council. That would be our intent, is to try to draw from existing plans wherever possible.
all right, anything else? And the same accounting firm that does the Academy Awards will keep the projects in a sealed envelope until it gets to council. Anything further before we vote? We'll call the vote. Can we just, Councillor, do you really feel the need to add something, or are you way okay?
Well, I put up my hand. I just want to acknowledge the mayor for the great work he's done in advocating and working with the other levels of government. So thank you for the opportunity, Mr.
All
Chair.
right, thank you. Votes up. I make it a policy never to thank the mayor.
Closing the vote, motion passed 5-1.
All right, we're going to move on now to the scheduled item, which is scheduled not before 4:10, which is on community water fluoridation. I just want to remind everyone that this is a delegated meeting. This is not a public participation meeting, which means if you wish to speak, you would have had to have been granted delegation status to speak before the meeting or be approved at this particular meeting. So with that in mind, I wonder if we might first do item D, 3.1D, which are the people who have given requests, additional requests for delegation status, and they would, of course, need to be approved to speak today. So I wonder if someone is prepared to move that I think there's 5 names there that they be given status to speak as delegates today. Councillor Van Holst?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to move that we hear the delegates that have come today. It's been, I guess, a policy of our previous council. We usually do that. So.
Our normal policy is to hear them at the following meeting, but it would involve hearing them today with the other delegations. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Pelosa? So just to be clear, those are the people listed on item 3.1D be added as delegates to speak today. Any further discussion? Call the vote.
Closing the vote, motion passed 6-0.
And before we start the delegations, I just want to let everyone know, if you didn't know beforehand, that you will be allowed, we've already received any material that you've submitted, and I'm assuming that it's been read and reviewed by counselors. So I would suggest if you're making a written, verbal presentation, you may not want to try to review all of that, but that's just a suggestion. You will be allowed 5 minutes to speak, and that will be enforced. So when you have 1 minute left to speak, we will advise you. We may give you a few seconds after 5 minutes to just finish your thoughts, but it will be strictly applied. The other thing is no cheering, booing, or anything like that. We don't want to disrespect anyone else with a different point of view, nor do we want to discourage someone with a different point of view than us to speak because of the fear of being booed when they speak. So without that all being said, you'll be asked to come to the microphones if you're up top, or to the podium if you have a presentation. We'll ask for your name and address, and then the time will start as soon as you start talking. So the first delegation is K. Miller and C. Gupta from Safe Water London. Are they here? Okay. Are you going to come up to the microphone here?
I don't know where to go to.
Oh, this right here, and we'll make sure it's user friendly. All right, you have a separate. All right, we'll get that set up for you. You're going to time it?
Yeah.
All right, could we have your name and address, please, if you don't mind giving it? If you don't wish to give it, that's fine. Your name and address?
My name is Callie Miller, 925 Lawson Road, Unit 19, London, N6G 4X3.
And thank you very much for coming, and your time will start now.
Okay. Mr. Chairman and councilors, I trust that you have done your due diligence on the issue of artificial water fluoridation to make sure you have not been given incorrect information. You will find that our MOH and many dentists will tell you that fluoridation is safe. What if they have just believed that they were what they were told and did not do their due diligence? Which you can see in the rebuttal to Dr. Mackey's presentation, sent to you by email yesterday. Hopefully you have done yours and will not vote to put a toxic waste product, hydrofluorosilicic acid, in our drinking water, without there being toxicology studies to show that it is safe for human consumption. As you can see, I can't do it all. It's in the agenda. As you can see by the projected PDF file, Health Canada also admits it has no toxicology studies on HFSA and no double-blind, randomized clinical trials of fluoridation. Thus, there are no studies adequate to establish the alleged safety or efficacy of fluoridation. The region, the province, and the NSF are also unable to supply these studies. Not only is this a very harmful process, it is against our individual rights granted to us in the Canada Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We are not to be medicated without informed consent, dose control, and no regulation. No one can rebuke you for refusing to medicate your neighbors and disrespect their rights. Toothpaste, dental varnishes, and gels are effective and regulated with no waste. 97% or more of the fluoridated water is wasted down the drain into the environment. I realize that this information is almost too much to accept, given we are told it is safe for human consumption by our MOH and dentists. Maybe they have quite possibly accepted that what they were told and not done their own due diligence, or their position requires that they support the policy, among other possible reasons for their misstatements. Please do your own due diligence on this subject before you vote on it. You will find my presentation in your agenda with links to legitimate studies. There is enough science in the book, Pregnancy and Fluoride Do Not Mix, a copy of which many of you received, to end fluoridation today. There are studies under the auspices of the U.S. Institute of Health showing that when a pregnant woman drinks fluoridated water, she is lowering the IQ of the baby she is carrying. Despite the thousands of studies showing fluoride as a cumulative toxin is harmful to humans, we really don't need them here in London to turn off the fluoridation tap tonight, because no toxicity studies, no fluoridation. How do they know it is not harming us? Where are those studies? How do they know it can't cause Alzheimer's when it is a well-proven neurotoxin? Where are those studies? Please use your common sense and vote an end to injecting the toxic waste, hydrofluorosilicic acid, in our drinking water, when by law it cannot be put into the air, water, or land where it is created in the production of phosphate fertilizer, especially when no toxicology studies have been done to show it is safe for human consumption, with many showing it's harmful. Instead of spending millions to environmentally dispose of HFSA, the manufacturers sell it to London at a profit. Fluoridation chemicals are not regulated by Health Canada for the purpose of treating or preventing dental decay.
You have 1 minute left, Ms. Miller.
They aren't manufactured in sanitary conditions and are unfit for human consumption, as more reason to end fluoridation. Thank you in advance for voting for the well-being, increased IQ, and good health of yourself, your children, and loved ones, as well as those who have elected you by voting to put artificial fluoridation on hold, using the precautionary principle until fluoridation is proven safe for all citizens of London. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gupta, you wanted to speak? Could I just get your name and address, if that's okay?
My name is Chris Gupta. I'm at 919 Plantation Road, London, Ontario.
We didn't hear that. Could you just turn on your microphone and speak?
My name is Chris Gupta, and my address is 919 Plantation, Ontario, London, Ontario.
Thank you. Apparently, we don't have a presentation.
Oh, I do. It's supposed to be coming up.
Well, no, staff's just saying that they did not receive a presentation from you.
Oh, I did send it, and I have it on the agenda. I saw it on the agenda.
Okay, but
Yeah.
We have a submission.
we have a submission, but not something that we could put on screen. So we don't have that.
It was submitted to be put on the screen, and I confirmed before I came here
All right.
that it would be on there, so it should be there.
But it isn't. So what would you like to do? Do you want to go ahead and speak? We have it in the information that we have, I think. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. So we have it in front of us in a paper form. It's just that by submitting it, it doesn't automatically go on. We put in the machine.
Yeah, but you have the check marks there, and it was.
Well, you and I can go back and forth all night on this, but do you want to start your presentation?
All right.
All right. Go ahead.
I'd like to address some deceptions regarding fluoridation and why these deceptions exist. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Fluoridation schemes are dishonest and misleading as they don't inform the residents that the chemical to fluoridate their water is an industrial toxin such as hydroxyfluoric acid. The constituents think and are led to believe that the fluoride used will be pharmaceutical grade like what the dentists use. It is illegal for dentists to use this chemical, and it's also illegal to put in toothpaste. Clearly, no one in their right mind will knowingly vote to agree on adding traces of lead, arsenic, mercury, as found in this chemical on municipal drinking water. The above violates the Safe Drinking Water, Ontario's Safe Drinking Water. Dilution is no defense for adding contaminant to drinking water. Being a waste product, this chemical does not meet good manufacturing standards. We are often told by fluoridation proponents that this industrial toxin is dissociates into pharmaceutical grade fluoride once it's put in water, as if traces of lead, arsenic, mercury just disappear. This is like saying that road salt becomes pharmaceutical grade salt once mixed in cooking water. Fluoride is a known neurotoxin, and there was a graph here, which you can see there, which shows you that it's actually more toxic than lead and slightly less than arsenic. Even though fluoride is is a known toxin. We have also been told that it is essential for healthy teeth. Are we to take it that something more toxic than that has just one effect, this dental fluorosis? Fluoridated versus non-fluoridated. Teeth are not falling out in non-fluoridated areas as we are led to believe. 62% of Canada is not fluoridated, and 99% of Europe is not fluoridated. Their teeth are as good, if not better. This is an attachment to show you the evidence for that. It is a well-known fact that fluoridated areas have much higher dental fluorosis, a pathological condition which clearly is damage to the teeth, requiring profitable, expensive cosmetic surgeries. Fluoridated areas require more dental visits. And there was a graph here which showed states in the US from CDC's own database where there was more fluoridation, whereas less fluoridation. And the graph shows very clearly that there's much more dental visits when there's more fluoridated states than in non-fluoridated states. Again, it's all about the money. According to CDC own database, the fluoridated areas have more dental visits. Cavity repair is cheap. Fluorosis repair is expensive, up to more than $15,000 in some cases. An example from which agrees with the CDC's own data is preschool children tooth decay rates nearly doubled after fluoridation became Kentucky law, and there was evidence on there shown there. In addition to tooth decay, we know that there will be more fluorosis. Total cost to treat dental fluorosis in London over the next 40 years is approximately $41.5 million. See attached workup by Dr. Hardy Lembeck, retired head of preventative dentistry, University of Toronto. And this cost does not include the cost of water fluoridation, nor all the health costs from fluoride toxicity. Some of these can be very high, like a loss of IQ from neurotoxins such as fluoride and lead. Clearly, their ridiculous pleas to protect the teeth is all about the money, has little to do with teeth. Water fluoridation is profitable. The waste companies get to dispose their toxins with a profit to boot. The dentists get more business, and they both lobby the authorities to do their bidding. Is it any wonder that they love fluoridation? Conclusion, Health Canada has no safety studies on water fluoridation chemicals. Health Canada has...
You have 1 minute left, Mr. Gupta.
Health Canada has no, and MOH can't account for fluoride from all sources and have no clue to the health of the recipients. They deliberately confuse level or concentrations with dose, which clearly are not one and the same, and they call tooth damage alteration of appearance. The fact that the vast number of countries and jurisdictions in the world don't put toxins into their water systems at uncontrolled doses and dosages without informed consent and without any form of ongoing monitoring or follow-up. As conscious, moral, and ethical counselors, it is incumbent upon you as the ultimate decision makers to protect the health and well-being of the residents. You are elected to serve and protect. It behooves you to stop this fraudulent practice like most of the world has done. This question is for Dr. Mackey. Where is the physician who will impose lifelong prescription for an untested, potentially toxic substance without proven clinical benefit on the benefit he or she has
Mr.
never
Gupta,
met?
you've now hit 5 minutes. Are you almost done?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you 10 or 15 more seconds.
Okay, where is the physician who will impose lifelong prescription for an untested, potentially toxic substance without proven clinical benefit on a patient he or she has never met or interviewed or examined? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to assure you, we do have what you sent in to us. The committee does have that, okay?
Okay.
Next is Dr. Mackey. Thank you very much for coming, Dr. Mackey. I think you've been here before, so we know your name and where you work.
Yes, proud resident of the downtown London area. Thank you for having me, Mr. Chair. I want to make sure people have a context of the history of water fluoridation. Communities began in Ontario in the 1940s and 50s, fluoridating water across Ontario. Here in London, there was a plebiscite in 1966 where citizens supported water fluoridation, and the practice began here the following year. The science in the 1960s was fairly strong to support water fluoridation, but there have been literally thousands of additional studies since then that have been conducted on the safety and effectiveness of the practice. I've been closely watching water fluoridation literature for about the past decade, And you do see that literature becoming stronger and stronger each year. Public Health Ontario, which is our provincial public health body, did a review of the fluoride literature on safety and effectiveness last year, and they found again, water fluoridation helps children's teeth in this day and age, even when toothpaste is widely used. And the claims of health risks are not supported by science. The most striking evidence over the past few years, though, Mr. Chair, has been the evidence about what happens when communities discontinue water fluoridation. In Windsor, we saw a 50% increase in cavities a few years after water fluoridation was discontinued. Windsor, fortunately, has chosen, their council has decided to reintroduce the practice of water fluoridation, and that's really being looked at anywhere where you see, each time water fluoridation is discontinued, you see an epidemic of children's cavities come into a community, and that's quite consistent across the literature. It's true that overexposure to fluoride can cause dental fluorosis, which is a mottling of the teeth. In its mild form, white mottling on the teeth wouldn't even be noticed by an untrained individual. In moderate and severe forms, you do see brown that can become a cosmetic issue. I mentioned dental fluorosis because we do not see moderate or severe dental fluorosis in Canada. If the drinking water that we were fluoridating were a problem, we would see moderate and severe dental fluorosis coming up across our communities. We don't see that because the water is fluoridated at a safe level. Although it's proven safe and effective, some people don't want to consume fluoridated water. They have options. It's easy to install a reverse osmosis filter. Unfluoridated water is cheap and available at any supermarket. Mr. Chair, water fluoridation is considered one of the 10 great public health achievements of the 20th century, along with vaccination and seatbelts. The science today is stronger than it has ever been, and I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm happy to address any health-related questions that might arise. Thanks.
There is 2 minutes remaining, and so if we want to take up that time with some questions, I don't have an issue with that, but I would just caution that I don't want us to go into a long exercise at this point. I think the presentation was pretty clear.
Mr. Chair, maybe I will just take one more moment. Then I have a list here. We verified 57 Canadian and international organizations. We just did this verification today that support water fluoridation. They include the Canadian Medical Association, Canadian Nursing Association, Canadian Dental Association, Canadian Public Health Association, and associations across North America. Thank you.
Thank you. Just questions, and we have 1 minute, so I'll be cutting it off at 1 minute. Councillor Lehman.
Through the chair, thank you, Dr. Mackey. Over the last number of weeks, have seen quite a volume of material from those wishing to take fluoride out of our water. As a non-scientist and someone who, I think we all care very much about our drinking water, who do I believe? There's, in this day of internet, every side is taken to the nth degree. I would just like you to kind of address that question for us.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. There are 2 ways to review the scientific literature. You can make your decision beforehand and go find the studies that support you, or you can take an objective view, consider all of the research, and try and present a balanced view. That's what we do with the Public Health Department. We have no interest in fluoride except the health effects that it has. If there were serious health effects, we would be the first ones to recommend discontinuing water fluoridation. The evidence is strong around the dental. What I would be happy to do at another time, if you're interested, is explain how we review the medical literature, how we make sure that those reviews are unbiased, how we validate the reviews across multiple reviewers. Happy to walk you through that process if you're interested any time.
All right, we've used up all of the time. So just so we're fair here, if someone else uses less than 5 minutes and questions, we want to have questions, that can happen. So if you have less time, we can do that. Thank you, Dr. Mackey. Next person is R. Hudon from Safe Water, Ottawa. Are you here? Nope. Oh, so they're not looking for delegation? Nope. All right. P. Colleen, are you here? Yes. Go ahead. Come to the microphone. You're going to come up to the microphone there. Yeah, I submitted a presentation, and I have backup in case. Okay. Again, maybe I can just point this out. If you sent in some paperwork and said, here's my presentation, it doesn't automatically end up on here. You have to ask for that. So is it on the machine? No. No, it's not. So. Yeah, go ahead, as long as it's not going to be cumbersome and take us a long time. I'll deal with it. Councillor Van Holst, I hope you're going to help me?
Yes, I'm hoping perhaps from the clerks, maybe while this is going on, they can describe to our citizens how the process of getting a presentation on here is done, because clearly we've had two people not be able to do that. We're going to have many more public participation meetings.
All right, why don't we do, are you ready to go? Can we put it up on the screen? There you go. So if you show up at a meeting with one of those little flash drive things, they'll plug it in and you're ready to go. How's that? Maybe we can deal with it later. I don't really want to take up more of the meeting with the, okay. Could I have your name and address and then we're ready to go? Thank you very much for coming.
And before I get into the crux of my presentation, I just want to guide you to 3 links relating to the presentation I gave in 2012 at the public participation meeting, where I basically explained the connection between nutrition and dental health. So here is a link to the work of a dentist by the name of Dr. Weston A. Price called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. And here is an actual link to my 5-minute presentation, and also another link describing how and why fluoridation came to be in the first place. So today I'm going to talk about how and why artificial water fluoridation is a fundamentally flawed practice. In fact, there's an enormous disconnect between the alleged benefits of artificial water fluoridation and genuine science, or even common sense for that matter. In fact, there hasn't even been a safety study done on the fluoride chemical that is added to our city water. So with regards to safety and requesting this research, it hasn't come to the fore at all, and we've been asking for this research now for decades. And so another reason why the science is fundamentally flawed is because the fluoride ion is not even an essential nutrient. So there is not one biochemical process in the body that needs fluoride in order to function properly. So pulling fluoride out of your life will render no adverse effects, but unfortunately when you are exposed to too much fluoride, you can have adverse effects. And when Dr. Bryna Wachowski, our former medical officer of health, was speaking on the radio back in 2011, she said that 85% of children here in London develop cavities. So these are London children, a city that is fluoridated, and we see a devastatingly high amount of cavities even though our water is fluoridated. And at the public participation meeting in 2012, when she was asked if it's better to ingest fluoride or apply it topically, Dr. Wachowski replies, the main effect from fluoride is a topical effect. And even the CDC acknowledges the fact that the main effect from fluoride is topical. As such, there is really no need to add it to our drinking water. In fact, if you apply it topically in the form of toothpaste, there you may have a choice, or you may have a chance that it will actually work. At the same public participation meeting, we had a local dentist showing pictures of 2 of his pediatric patients where we see devastatingly high amounts of tooth decay in their mouths. And he was touting the benefits of fluoride, even though these children, who are London children in a fluoridated community, we can't see the protective element of fluoride on their teeth here at all. And I know that some of the councillors are holding on to the idea that fluoride is a good thing simply because they can't believe that Health Canada can make a mistake or that science can be wrong. And here I want to point out where smoking is concerned. In the 1920s, there were already reports linking cigarette smoking with cancer. We didn't get labeling on cigarette packages until 1989, but that was not Health Canada doing that. Health Canada didn't get involved with labeling until the year 2000. So for 80 years, essentially, Health Canada sat on their hands on this issue linking cigarette smoking with cancer and warning the public about it. And here we see again Health Canada approving drugs, unfortunately, that can cause serious adverse drug reactions to the tune of 200,000 per year, and possibly even 22,000 or more Canadians are dying every year because of defective drugs that are approved by Health Canada. And here again, we see that there are defective medical devices on the market, devices that are approved.
1 minute remaining.
Devices that are approved by Health Canada. And yet, over 1,400 deaths per year can be potentially attributed to these medical devices and thousands of injuries. Now, in defense of Health Canada, they are not doing this research. Rather, they are relying on the research that is funded by industry. And they're hoping that this research is both truthful and accurate. And you have to be like a forensic scientist today to look at science and see where the conflicts of interests are coming from. And here we have an example of a scientist who is a watchdog, Dr. John Ioannidis. So he researches the research, and he estimates that as much as 90% of the science today is flawed. So there is some good science out there, but like I said, you have to be a forensic scientist to go through that data to see where the conflicts of interest are and how and why they may exist in the first place. So I urge you, I urge every city councillor to please start off with a clear slate when you're looking at this issue, because there are potential flaws in and around the alleged benefits and safety of fluoride. There are some very
now hit 5 minutes.
I'm done.
You're done.
I'm ending on the note that I would like to put forward a request to go before the entire council. I don't know if it means doing a public participation meeting, but the last time we had a public participation meeting, it was supposed to be in the form of a debate. It was not in the form of a debate, and we could certainly use that.
Right. I get your point. We're now up over 5.5 minutes.
Right.
Okay.
So I don't know if we can have a discussion around what the next
Well, you
step
put
might
it
be.
on the table, so it'll be up to councillors whether they discuss it or not. Okay?
So that's the next step.
Well, it's up to council. The councillors here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is El Giancino.
She's unable to attend. She sent in an email.
All right. Apparently she's unable to attend today, so she had sent in material that we can review. Next is N. Kuzmanovic. Is that person here? No, then we'll move on to the next, which is L. Timler from the School of Health Sciences, Fanshawe College. Welcome, thank you for coming.
Just wanted to make sure, oh, this is on.
Great, can we just get your address if that's okay with you?
I'm a resident of downtown London.
Okay, thank you very much, and go ahead.
All right, so thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, and councillors for allowing me the opportunity to speak on this really important issue. I'm a registered dental hygienist, and I teach in the dental hygiene program at Fanshawe College. I'm here tonight to voice my support to continue community water fluoridation in our city. In my work as an educator and a public health professional, I see firsthand how oral disease impacts quality of life and well-being for the most vulnerable in our community. Those of us that have experienced untreated tooth pain know that it's chronic and debilitating. It affects our sleep, our nutrition, our mood, our work, and our play. However, it may surprise you to know that dental decay is the leading cause of day surgery in Canada for children 5 and under, most of which are conducted under general anesthesia. A recent report from the Canadian Institutes of Health Information shows that the public cost of daytime surgery for dental decay in children 5 and under is approximately $21 million per year in Canada, and this is but a fraction of the cost. Data from the Canadian Health Measures Survey estimates that we lose over 4 million workdays per year due to dental problems and treatment in Canadian and adults, with a cost of potential productivity losses over $1 billion annually. What we do know is that OHIP does not cover the health of our teeth and gums. Data obtained from the Association of Community Health Centers shows that in Ontario alone, we spend approximately $38 million annually on hospital, ER, and family doctor visits for pain and infection of the mouth. For those without any means to pay for dental services via employer insurance plans or out of pocket, which is an estimated 2.3 million of us in Ontario, this starts a cycle of doctor's visits for antibiotics and painkillers that do little to solve the problem. Children, adults, seniors, dental decay affects us all, yet it's a disease that is entirely preventable. A large body of evidence demonstrates that oral health prevention is the key and one of the most safe and cost-effective preventive strategies that we have is community water fluoridation. Research shows that systemic benefits of fluoride for children 8 and under as the permanent teeth are developing. Fluoride ions become incorporated into the outermost layer of the tooth to make it more resistant to dental decay. Once the teeth have fully erupted, the benefit is primarily topical. Constant low-level exposure to fluoride ions in our water supply for adults and seniors is vital in buffering the harmful acids produced by oral bacteria causing dental decay. Community water fluoridation is one of the most celebrated public health achievements of the 20th century, and for over 70 years, community water fluoridation has been proven safe and effective. It's supported by the World Health Organization, Centers for Disease Control, among others. A recent review from Public Health Ontario analyzed the available evidence on community water fluoridation and found that among well-designed, validated studies, no harmful effects were found from the consumption of optimally fluoridated water at 0.7 parts per million, which is what we have here in London. This review supports findings from a 2010 Health Canada guidance report that also found no evidence to support a link between optimally fluoridated water and any adverse health effects. Dr. Mackey has kindly explained the role of evidence-based practice and how a significant body of reliable research demonstrates the cost-benefit of water fluoridation. As a proven population health strategy, water fluoridation remains within the purview of public health professionals and related legislation which establishes reporting, monitoring, and acceptable levels of fluoride to maximize the benefits of what naturally occurs in our environment. In Canada, we have a core set of values as evidenced by many public health programs and strategies that allow for infringement of individual right in some instances. For example, regulations on smoking in public places, seatbelt laws, fines for texting while driving, and restaurant inspections by public health officials can all be framed around infringement of individual rights. However, in Canada, we accept the notion that public policies are necessary to put the common good above the wishes of some individuals, and community water fluoridation fits into this paradigm. It's interesting to note that Windsor has undergone a similar public debate in 2013, and at that time, councillors voted...
Just to let you know, you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Councillors voted to stop supplementing the water system. In the past 5 years, however, Windsor-Essex County, as Dr. Mackey has already mentioned, that their rates of childhood tooth decay have increased over 51% since that time. Windsor is in a unique position in terms of demographics, especially when it comes to statistics like child poverty, where they have the second highest rate of child poverty in Canada. However, as many of you know from the recent Vital Signs report and others, London trails close behind is having the third highest rate of child poverty in Canada. And that's who's hit the hardest when members of the public call to limit the scope of preventive measures supported by public health and the evidence. Those in the lowest income brackets who do not have the resources to cover the increasing cost of dental care. Fluoridation is the most equitable, accessible, and cost-effective strategy we have to reduce dental decay in our community. Regardless of income, education, living arrangements, community water fluoridation benefits us all equally. This past December, Windsor has voted in favor of optimal fluoridation. City councillors listened to both sides and decided to vote in the favor of science.
We're at 5 minutes now, so if you could just wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last delegate is M.
He withdrew.
Chekowitz. He apparently withdrew his delegation. So that is the end of the delegations. I just want to thank everyone who spoke for staying very much within the time limits and being so courteous. So I'll now ask the committee if there's anything they wish to do with this. The first option, of course, is to receive the delegations and move forward, or something else. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, if you'll indulge me, I actually have a technical question that I'd like to direct towards Dr. Mackey.
Go ahead.
Dr. Mackey, in terms of our rate of water fluoridation, our percentages per, and you will know better than I what your measurements are, how do we compare to other communities? I'm curious because I certainly understand the concerns that people have, but I also see the benefits, and I just want to know, you know, is our fluoridation level higher than it needs to be?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. There's been a significant amount of examination more recently around exactly what the right concentration of fluoride is to protect teeth and to avoid any health risks. The CDC and Health Canada recommend 0.7 parts per million, which is the amount that London uses. There are others who have suggested that 0.6 parts per million would be an adequate dosage. You know, I think that London's rate is a good balance, but there's a range that would be a reasonable approach.
Thank you. Councillor. Excuse me, I had my name on the list there. I'm sorry, could you just, I'm sorry, your name is? Could you scroll down? I'm sorry, what is your name? If you, I see your name, but it wasn't as a delegate, it was just for a presentation. Well, somebody from committee would have to move that you be allowed to speak as a delegate. So that's, I'll put that to the committee. I don't want to cut anybody off who wanted to speak, so I'm going to leave with the committee. You prepared to move something, Councillor Lehman?
I'll move that he be allowed to speak.
All right, seconder, Councillor Van Holst. All right, all in favor? All right, so just so everybody's aware, this is not a public participation meeting. If people are going to start popping up saying, I'd like to speak. No, I wasn't, sir. Sir, we're going to give you a chance to speak. So, yeah, you did send in paperwork, but we weren't aware you wanted delegate status, but now you have it, so go ahead.
You hear me?
I do.
Okay. Yeah, first of all, I want to say the cause and effect.
Could I just?
Yes.
Sorry, again, I don't want to interrupt.
Mike Lucas, 417 Baker Street, London.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Not a problem.
A little confusion here because I saw my name, okay? All right. Okay, first of all, cause and effect with stuff like this is almost impossible to prove. That, you know, are your bones disintegrating because you're drinking fluoride? You know, you'd have to take a baby, two babies from when they were very young, and give one fluoride and the other not. It's completely unethical to do stuff like that. They had the same problem trying to prove that cigarette smoking was harmful. Cause and effect, very difficult to prove. My point is, I'm being medicated against my will. No one asked me if I wanted this stuff in my water. I don't agree with equating it with seatbelts. It's not the same thing, okay? It's a toxic substance is being added to my water against my will. I never got a vote on it. I would like a vote on it, or I would like you to vote against it, because it's unethical. I don't know about the 50% and all these figures that are being, you know, floated around here. Statistics, again, pretty sketchy in my view. You know, you can make them prove whatever you want. But yeah, basically, I think that people have grounds for a legal procedure against London here about getting medicated against their will with this stuff. It is a toxic substance. Fluoride is extremely toxic. Industries couldn't even dispose of it before. And now they're selling it to the communities to put it in the water. Okay, I'm finished. Thank you.
Go back to the committee then. Councillor Pelosi.
Thank you, and through the chair, I had a follow-up question, or rather two, for Dr. Chris Mackey, if he wouldn't mind. At your will, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead. Just ask it through me, so we're not getting cross debate.
Yeah, through the chair. Hearing that London fluoridates the water at 0.07, do we take into account any other means in which we're getting our fluoride through the foods we eat and how it moves through the food chain? Is that taken in consideration?
Through you, Mr. Chair, people that are concerned about their fluoride exposures should be looking at things like black tea. This would be a major source of fluoride exposure in Canada, and in communities, both fluoridated and unfluoridated, where we have looked at the concentration of fluoride in people's urine. It's easier to test urine than blood, so that's how it's tested. You see a wide variation that relates to things unrelated to water fluoridation. So if that's where people are concerned, if people, I'm not, as a public health practitioner, concerned that we're seeing overexposure to fluoride. We don't see dental fluorosis, which would be the sign. But if people are concerned, there's other places they should be looking.
Thank you. And it's my understanding that the Ontario Ministry of Health recommends fluoride in the water, but doesn't actually mandate it. Just wondering for any points of clarification of if it's so important, why is it not mandated?
Through you, Mr. Chair. When fluoride was first introduced, 40s, 50s, 60s, the tendency was to allow the community to have a plebiscite so that there was a community decision to spend the money on fluoride and to protect teeth. And so that's where the ministry has really left it. You can imagine that the ministry is quite happy to have communities making independent, autonomous decisions about this and not to have to make their own decision.
Any further questions? We'll do questions first before we go any further. Councillor Lane. Oh, I'm sorry. It was Councillor Van Holst was in front. Go ahead, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, to Dr. Mackey, I'm wondering if what's the sufficient amount of fluoride we're trying to get Londoners to ingest? And is it the same for everyone?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So this is not a medication. It's not a medication that is dosed as a medication. What we're doing is supplementation of a food source or a beverage source. Supplementation of food and beverages through you, Mr. Chair, is a well-established practice. You probably know about iodized salt. Salt is iodized in order to prevent tumors of the thyroid. People don't even hear about goiter anymore these days. That's because salt iodization is very effective at preventing goiter. We also supplement flour with folate to prevent neural tube defects in children. So all flour that you eat in Canada has folate added to it to prevent neural tube defects. And the way that food and beverage supplementation works is that it's set at a very low level so that you receive the health benefit, but there isn't a health risk. That's how that dosing is done.
Okay. Sure. Perhaps two. That's it. So in your report, you talk about the balance. We're balancing cavities protection versus fluorosis. So I believe that means that some children we're going to not get cavities who might have, and other children will get fluorosis who otherwise wouldn't have got it because we're adding that extra. That's what we're trying to balance. Is that correct?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Again, in Canada, we're talking about mild fluorosis. So something that, I, not trained as a dentist, likely would not notice on teeth. White modeling, so white on white. It's virtually very difficult to identify. The moderate and severe forms that are cosmetic issues don't happen in Canada. And we look at all children's teeth in SK and grade 2 across Ontario every year, so millions of children's teeth. We're not seeing those issues coming up. So.
Okay, and finally, so my wife grew up in London. She's got dental fluorosis. It's mild. I can see it, but what should she do?
It's a bit of a difficult question. He's already indicated he's not a dentist. Is that within your area of expertise? Now the lawyer's coming out in me. Is it within an area you can give evidence on, Dr. Mackey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think probably my colleague from the Dental Hygienists Association would be better positioned, but again, we're talking about a cosmetic issue, sir.
I married her anyway.
Did you want to hear from someone else? We do have someone here on that if you want to hear from him. No?
Perhaps a dentist would be, okay.
All right, let's leave it at that then. Councillor Lehman?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask a question of our city engineer. Do we add any other chemicals to our water that would end up in a glass of water that we drink as Londoners from our tap?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we use a variety of chemicals in treatment. Those are not chemicals that remain in the water supply. The chemicals that remain in the water supply are largely fluoride and chlorine. Chlorine is necessary to have disinfection throughout our system and prevent some fairly serious diseases.
All right, just dealing with questions now. Any questions from the, I was going to say the cheap seats, but I won't, I won't say that. Any other questions? All right, does anybody have something that at a minimum we'll receive the delegations, but I don't know if there's anything further committee wants to do other than that today? Councillor Cassidy.
I have one question. I'm not sure if Dr. Mackey can answer it, but I'll give a try. So it's my understanding from, sorry to make you do this, but through the chair, having, an anecdotal evidence is the worst kind of evidence, I know, but I have a niece that has dental fluorosis, and it's quite noticeable. And I know she had a habit as a young child of swallowing her toothpaste. So I'm wondering if there's a way to determine which fluorosis is caused by the water and which is caused by something like that from a child that swallows her toothpaste no matter how many times you tell her not to do that.
Yes, through Mr. Chair. We wouldn't be able to, dissect or diagnose what comes from where. But again, if somebody's exhibiting anything beyond mild fluorosis, it's most likely due to other sources. If you ate a, tube of toothpaste, that would be equivalent of swallowing hundreds of thousands of liters of water. So it's a much more significant source.
Done with questions now. All right, anything else? Councillor Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to just express a couple of comments, and then I'm going to take a stab at a motion here with your indulgence. Given the history that fluoridation started in London through the process of a referendum, I have to say that as an individual councillor, I would be really reluctant to rescind the results of that referendum without the public having a referendum again on withdrawing it. To me, the mandate that we have as a council to supersede the results of a referendum, I would need a really strong indicator from the public that they wanted to vote on this again. We just had an election. Thousands and thousands of people voted to put us here, but I would want to see thousands and thousands of people wanting a vote on that through a referendum before I made a decision to do that. That said, I also agree with what was said about, a seatbelt, while it may be legally mandated, is still a choice that people make to put on when they get in their vehicle, whereas drinking something that's in the water is not a choice. So I'm going to move that, and I'll do this as an A and a B, and we'll see if maybe there's a second or for it. I'm going to move A, that we receive the delegations from today, their information, and B, that we request the city engineer in consultation with the Middlesex London Health Unit to come back to us with a report on the advisability of lowering the fluoridation rate to point, and I'm going to make sure that I get this right, and I'll just look to Dr. Mackey for a nod, to 0.06 from the current 0.07. And I'm getting a thumbs up there, so those numbers are correct. Oh.
0.006.
0.00? No, 0.6, not 0.0. Oh, 0.6, okay. Thank you.
All right.
That's why we ask engineers.
All right, just so we all understand, what is the rationale? Is there a rationale for that 0.1 change that you can tell us about?
Certainly. My rationale just in this respect is I understand what people are saying about their concerns of exposure. And I have certainly seen science, decades-old science, refuted in various industries, most notably in the nutritional field, where at one time trans fats were the villain, another time it's sugar. Nutritional ideas come and go through the decades, and a lot of it is predicated, frankly, on where the research money is coming from. So I understand about people wanting to have a choice, and people do have options to increase their fluoridation through the use of various dental hygiene products, and they're free to do that. But I think that at least if we look at lowering this, we are respecting the fact that people are concerned about the level of exposure that they are currently receiving.
All right, so that's the motion. Is there a seconder for that motion? Yes.
Just a point of
Councillor.
order,
What's your point of order?
Mr. Chair. Are we still in a public participation meeting?
We were never in a public
Okay, yes,
participation
okay, so we can just receive the
Yes.
delegations.
Okay, so first of all, I need a seconder for the motion if there is going to be one. Is there a seconder for this motion? The one that Councillor Lewis, he has a part A and a part B, so I'm looking for someone to second that motion. So the motion is to receive the delegations heard at the meeting, and part B is to request the city engineer in consultation with the Middlesex London Health Unit to report back with respect to lowering the fluoridation in the London drinking water to 0.6 milligrams per liter. So that is the motion on the floor. It's a two-part motion.
Maybe split them, Chair.
We can split them. But I need a seconder. I don't even have a seconder yet, so that I need. Or it's not going to be debated on the floor. All right. So Councillor Pelosi is seconded, so it's on the floor, and I will split it when it comes to a vote. Any discussion? Councillor Van Holst. That arm went up like...
Good, huh? I was hoping for an opportunity for a little discussion. Actually, maybe a chance to move back into science teacher mode. So if I can for a second, I wanted to explain a little bit about what's going on with an illustration. Mr. Chair, Valentine's is coming up, so I wanted to use little cinnamon hearts as an example of what's going on here. So we take, as a city, a liter of water, and we add some fluoride to it, and you can imagine that this 70 cinnamon hearts are what we add. And when we drink the water as a citizen, half of this is excreted, and most of the rest is deposited in our bones or some other organs. And what makes it to our teeth in our saliva, which is the goal of fluoridation, getting fluoride to the teeth, is one of these, 0.01 parts per million. This is what the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, says is what fluoridation adds to the game. Now, it's worthwhile looking at what toothpaste does, which Dr. Mackey said it's got more fluoridation in there. Toothpaste is actually 1,000 parts per million, and this is 0.01. So if we're going to compare those, we would have to see what 100,000 cinnamon hearts looks like, and I've got those here.
All right, I hope this isn't too far, Councillor. There's entertainment value that I appreciate, but...
Thank you. I'll call a point of privilege as well. If I think I can proceed. This is important.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead.
So, if we were to pack 100,000 cinnamon hearts, it would look like this, Mr. Chair.
I don't want any councillors sort of
Okay,
injured.
I'll just keep one here for the sake.
Thank you.
So, so this is toothpaste, and this is what companies like Crest and Colgate have determined through their research is what's required to have a positive dental effect, and this is what fluoride is providing, fluoridation is providing. So it seems that one group is off in terms of what's needed. So it may be the case that fluoridation does very, very little. And that's one of the claims that's been made is that it doesn't really have an effect. And the fact that we see is really leveraged. It's a leveraged bias of the health professionals who perform the tests. And clearly there's a very strong bias in English-speaking countries for fluoridation. Some of the leverage that happens, I can kind of describe in this way. There's the idea of a big but insignificant relative difference. So imagine I've got 1 drop of water in this glass and 3 drops of water in this glass. And so this one has 300% more water in it. And I ask you, which glass would better quench your thirst? Well, it would be neither, because both are fairly insignificant. And that's what we see in some of the research, which is heavily criticized in the scientific community. For instance, I'll give you the example of 2 tests done in the 1990s. They're nationwide US tests. In one test, the fluoridated group for 5-year-olds and the unfluoridated group both had at least 99.9% healthy tooth surfaces. In the other study, the fluoridated group had 70% less tooth decay. And so the trick question is, what's the difference between these 2 tests? And the answer is that they were the same. They were the same study. It's just the information was presented in a different way. So it's very likely that there's little or no effect from the process of fluoridation. So reducing it a little bit is not going to have much of an effect, because it doesn't have much of an effect at all. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. The other thing is there has been, well, I'm probably going to move into a little more than 5 minutes, so perhaps there's another counselor who would like to say something while I put this back, and I'll ask to be on the second list.
All right. Anything else, Councillor Lehman?
I just want
to... There's a motion on the floor, so we're going to direct ourselves to...
Yeah, I just want to be clear. We're just debating whether we should receive the reports from the delegation, correct?
No, it's a 2-part motion. As I read it out, that the delegations be received, and Part B is a request of the city engineer in consultation with the Middlesex London Health Unit to report back with respect to lowering the fluoridation to 0.6. So that's why Councillor Van Holst did his demonstration, about more reference to that. So there is, I beg your pardon?
Splitting them?
We are splitting them. Anybody else wish to speak to the motion? Anybody? You don't have cinnamon hearts, I hope, Councillor Hopkins.
I love cinnamon hearts. But I do brush my teeth. I'm not very good at flossing. I do have a quick question, if I may, through the chair to staff. Can we just arbitrarily pick a number and request a report back and just reduce it? Or what goes into a report coming back to us to allow us to do that?
Thank you very much, Ms. Chair.
I'm going to take a crack at this, and then Mr. Mathers may have something to add. London's fluoridation landscape is a little complex. We fluoridate at the plant at Lake Erie for the Elgin primary water supply system. There are a number of municipalities that would have some interest in the level of fluoridation that the City of London receives. The water that comes in from Lake Huron on that supply system is fluoridated at the Arva Reservoir at the pump station, and that one is fully under the control of the City of London. We'd have to consider the legal framework of this sort of change. There is a possibility that even should council decide to go this way, it could only be for the part of the system over which we have direct control of the addition of fluoride. And we would report back on that if this motion were to proceed.
Other questions? Councillor Helmer?
Could our staff clarify why the level is set at 0.7 milligrams per liter now and what the recommended level is?
Through the chair, the 0.7 milligrams per liter value comes from both the recommendation of the Health Unit, but also Health Canada. So that's where that 0.7 value comes from.
Anything further with regard to the motion? Councillor Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just through you to colleagues, so that you're aware, the City of Hamilton fluoridates at the 0.6 which is why that was the number I chose. That's what municipalities who are fluoridating under the 0.7 seem to mostly be at, although there are some variations, and of course there are municipalities that don't fluoridate at all, but that was a comparable city, which is where I drew that number from.
Anything from someone who hasn't spoken yet before I go to Councillor Van Holst? Councillor Plaza?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few thoughts on the topic. Certainly, I was at the PPM that we had years ago on water fluoridation, and it was a very robust conversation there as well. And I do have concerns that we can't monitor how much fluoride each person's getting. Certainly, some of us drink a lot more water than others. Certainly, if it's infants, some people are breastfeeding versus bottle feeding with formula. I do understand the pitch of it's cost-effective and equitable. I don't agree with if you don't like it, just pay for bottled water or osmosis. That runs about $250 to have the system installed. And certainly studies do change, not as exciting as a cinnamon heart presentation, but theory is almost entirely based on statistical data having at best circumstantial value and being in part of questionable origin. This was Dr. Huper speaking to lung cancer. And is there really a case against smoking, and how good is the evidence? He was saying that certainly smoking could be okay, and also strangely cited a paragraph sooner was fluoride in the water, and there's no doubt that it's okay for you. I'm concerned about our role in not being experts. We've admitted to that already. We're not scientists, and we are taking Londoners' health into our hands. Certainly also sitting on a water board, there's other municipalities affected by our decisions, and I'm not sure what all those municipalities feel that they'd like for their residents, and those are just my thoughts, and thank you for hearing them.
Anyone else before we go to second round? All right, Councillor Van Holst. I can hardly wait to see what you have next.
Okay, yeah, great. First, it's just going to be a question, and it's going to be a question through you to our staff.
Thank you.
We used to fluoridate at 1.2 parts per million, and that was reduced to 0.7. And so I'm perhaps ask staff why that was the case, and that may assist in the council deciding whether a further reduction is necessary.
Thank you. Is someone able to answer that? Mr. Mayers?
Yeah, absolutely. Through the chair, I don't have any information on that previous level. I do have here today with me Dan Huggins, who's our water quality manager, and he can probably give me, he has much more background on the history of what we've done with fluoride, so if he's willing to take a moment and provide his thoughts.
Mr. Huggins, welcome. Go ahead.
Through the chair, the levels at which we fluoridate London's drinking water are always recommended to us by our local health unit. And in the past, higher levels were recommended. It is my recollection that as other fluoridation products became more readily available, and I'm talking over the decades, fluoridated toothpaste, for example, that the health professionals regularly review current research and have over time made recommendations to change those levels based on the most current research.
Okay.
Did you have another question, or did you want to?
Oh, I'll maybe make some more comments about that concern. So previously I was just talking about looking at the effectiveness of fluoride. Really, there's two things in question. Is it effective? Is it doing something? And is it safe? And those are the things that we really have to determine. If it doesn't do anything, then there's no reason for us to spend the money or to have to endure the term after term, the challenges and the concerns. And if it's not safe or there's a risk, then we really have to look at that because of the Safe Water Drinking Act, we are personally liable for the water to be safe. One more comment about the effectiveness. This was here we are. Yes, the Dean of Hull York Medical School, the UK leader of the systemic systematic review on fluoridation in 2000. He said if fluoridation were to be submitted anew for approval today, nobody would even think about it due to the shoddy evidence of effectiveness and the obvious downside of fluorosis. He said, I couldn't believe the low quality of the research. There's really hardly evidence the practice works. There's similar results about that in the 2015 Cochrane report. So there's big questions about whether the small amounts we put in there do anything. But the other thing we need to think about is it safe to be ingesting fluoride? And is it a thing that there's a safety concern? Well, if we look at the chemical itself, the HFSA we put in, that is a deadly toxin. If I were to put a teaspoon in your coffee and you drank it, you would die. However, that's not a concern we have because it's diluted so greatly. However, acute toxins are often also chronic toxins, and so we would have to ask ourselves, is fluoride causing chronic problems? And the fact is that it does. Certainly, if you look at communities where they have higher levels of fluoridation, it's devastating what it does to the body. At 10 or 20 parts per million, skeletal fluorosis comes up, and you'll see children with twisted limbs, and it's quite a horrible thing. Luckily, those things don't happen in North America. We're saved from that type of problem, but it certainly shows that that's what fluoride is capable of. Anybody who knows anything about chemistry and knows that fluoride is the most electronegative element should have a concern about putting that in the body, especially since, as Councillor Pelosi pointed out, it doesn't, I'm sorry, it was one of our delegates, I think, pointed out that it's not required for biological functions. But recently, we've seen more and more data and more studies about the harmfulness of fluoride. And so there's been a big change in the climate because recently, I should say in the past, our health units have said there's no evidence that fluoride is harmful. But now the dialogue is different. The dialogue is, well, the evidence isn't very good. So we're seeing evidence and we really need to look at it. So what we've seen in Mexico is a couple studies done by Canadians to show that it affects the mental health of the children and their mental development. That's a huge concern and something we
Councillor,
need
I
to
just want to, we're now over 5.5 minutes.
Okay,
So you'll either need an extension or you can go after the next speaker and go to round 3 or.
Okay, well, if I could have a short extension, I'll make it quick.
You'll make it work? Okay, is someone prepared to move an extension? Councillor Pelosi, move, seconder. Doesn't look like you're going to get an extension.
Okay, well.
We'll go to Mayor Holder.
Thank you very much. I've reserved some comments, and I wasn't sure I was going to comment, but I am actually quite moved by what Councillor Pelosi said earlier. We are not health professionals. I don't think it's our role to try to play doctor. We are not dentists. We have the Canadian Dental Association that supports the current levels of fluoride in our water. We have the Ontario Dental Association that supports this. We have our own medical officer of health that supports this. And we would imagine around this table that we know better than them. And I think when we want to play that kind of politics with health, I think we do a disservice to the citizens we serve. So I'm respectful of the delegations that we've heard on both sides of this issue, but I'm very mindful of the role that we play and the responsibility and obligation that we have. I think it's more critical that we respect and certainly understand the professional references of the individuals that give us advice so that we can act in the best interests of our citizens. And I sure hope it's not going to be based on broader influences that aren't necessarily based on science. And I will not be in support of removing fluoride from the water, to be absolutely clear as we get to that point. So while I'll say to you, Chair, that I will absolutely receive the delegations. I will not be supporting the reduction in London's drinking water. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Councillor Van Holst? This is third time around, so I'm hoping, do you have just a short?
Well,
Well, no,
I wanna tell you-
okay. No, I don't want to interfere, so I'll let you go.
Thank you very much. This is a very important topic. Mr. Chair, this past year, I took the initiative to organize all the pro and con arguments about this and put them online. I got the help of 2 journalists and a biologist to do that. It's there for everyone to see at decisionduediligence.com. It's something very helpful. As the Mayor pointed out, it's very important that we look to experts, and I would point out that on, I guess, page 235, you'll see that Dr. Sushila had come to the Peel region, but she was also here in London, and I had the opportunity to hear her speak. So she's from India. She spent 35 years doing primary research on the health effects of fluoride and fluorosis. So this is someone you consider an expert, a worldwide and preeminent expert in this topic. And when I heard her speech, I was certainly concerned about the effects of this substance. In India, their maximum is 1.0 parts per million, and they say that what they want is the less the better. So, and reason it's 1.0 is because to try and get it out of the water at that point at every place would be too much work. It's interesting that when when Health Canada was looking at studies, they only looked at English studies. And it's also interesting that fluoridation is an English-speaking phenomenon, and it's pushed by a very strong lobby. But if you were to look at other languages and other nations, you would go to a place like Holland, where Hans Muhlenberg did double-blind tests on the effects of fluoridation, and this was in 1975. They found out that, and could prove that it has, at those levels, harmful effects on people, numerous harmful effects, and that was removed because of that. We don't look at that data, and it would be, of course, difficult now for an organization like the CDC, who's promoted fluoride, advocated fluoride, given themselves a best in the century award for that, to change their mind. We don't really want to see the data, but we need to look at it. We need to look at the science. And I have a fear that fluoridation is going to turn out to be the Bill Cosby of water treatment processes, because it's something that we have thought was irreproachable, but maybe behind the scenes, it's actually doing great harm. So that's something we need to take seriously.
Yeah, I almost jumped in on that comment about the Bill Cosby. Not sure that's appropriate, Councillor, but we'll leave it at that. Anyone else wish to speak before I call the motion? Councillor Helmer?
Councillor Van Holst brought up the Safe Drinking Water Act, and I just wonder through the chair if we could get a question answered by our staff about what the maximum allowable concentration of fluoride is under those regulations and how that compares to what we're fluoridating to here in London.
Mr. Madish?
Through the chair, so to go back, we currently maintain the level at 0.7 milligrams per liter. The maximum acceptable concentration from the Safe Drinking Water Act and its related regulations is 1.5 milligrams per liter.
Anything further before we, I'll let Councillor Lewis sum up, keeping in mind, Councillor Lewis, there's been a lot of discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will keep this brief. I want to draw to my colleagues' attention that this motion is requesting staff to report back on the advisability of this. This is not a decision-making point. With all due respect to the mayor, I take a little bit of umbrage with the comment that councillors are trying to play doctor here. I don't think that that's the intent of anyone around this horseshoe on this or other matters. I think that we're listening to our constituents and the public, and we're asking important questions. The staff may come back and say, given the complexity of our water supply, that we're drawing from two sources, that this isn't even feasible considering our other municipal partners. They may come back and say, hey, everyone's on board with this. I haven't set a deadline time-wise on this because I know that the conversations will be complicated, but I don't think it does us any harm in consulting with the Middlesex London Health Unit and consulting with our other municipal partners through the engineering department and seeing what might be advisable as we reach a decision point in the future. So I'm going to ask you to support this, and we'll see what comes back from the health unit and from staff.
All right, so we're going to, anything further? Shouldn't be. All right, so we're going to call, first of all, part A of the motion, which is to receive the delegations.
Closing the vote, motion passed 6-0.
Okay, now we'll call clause B, one of the motion.
Okay, just refreshers.
Yeah, I got it now. Okay, we'll try. Closing the vote, motion 2.
Thank you very much, committee. So that's the decision that's been made of the committee today, that it will go back for staff to look at whether we can reduce it from 0.7 to 0.6. So thank you to all the people who came out today to speak, very much appreciated. And the matter will be going to council next week for the final matter. Moving on to items for direction, the second report of the Cycling Advisory Committee. Do I have a mover or second or anything raised out of that? Somebody prepared to move the report? Councillor Van Holst, seconded by Councillor Lewis. Any comment? We'll call the vote. No, oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't hear anything. Go ahead.
Sorry, just through the chair, a question as per 3.4, there's a request in there through that Civic Administration be requested to consider on-site monitoring. Are we endorsing that?
Not unless there's a motion brought that we endorse that. It is merely a request. So it will go to staff. Staff will consider it and then they will deal with it. But no, we're not. It's going to happen. Okay. Anything further? All right, we'll call the.
It's in slow motion.
What?
Spinning. My Screen is spinning.
What does that mean?
It's just stuck.
We're having a lot of problems with the screens today. I thank you for being patient, committee. My vote's up.
I can't even.
Vote should be up. Oh, no, that's
No.
community water
Yeah.
fluoridation is up
Yeah, I
again.
know. Yeah, I can't get it to come up on screen. I want to back out.
Can we do a manual vote? Can we just do a manual vote, please? All in favor, raise your hand. It's unanimous, 5-0. All right. Moving on to item 1, deferred matters list.
Point of order, Mr.
Sure,
Chair.
go ahead.
That last vote was 6-0.
It won't be recorded. Just be carried.
Thank you. Thanks for that correction. You're quite right. Moving on to item 5.1, deferred matters list. Any matters council committee wish to speak to? If not, I'll need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Lehman, seconded by Councillor Van Holst. Are we still voting manually?
Yeah, it's stuck.
We're going to vote manually again. All in favor? 6-0. I can now count, Councillor Lewis. I'm getting better. Deferred matters, I don't think there are any. There is a correspondence under 5.2 from Mr. Kogelhide. We merely need a receive and file. Councillor Lewis, seconded. Councillor Lehman, any comments? We're going to vote manually. All in favor? Again, 6-0. And I need a motion for adjournment. Somebody move that. Councillor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Van Holst. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you very much for being so patient. Have a nice evening.